And hello again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. My name's Josh Manning. I am Deputy Managing Editor for assignment over at the Western Journal. Joining me today are Brian Chai. What are you? You're Director of...
No, they changed that. I think I am
just got a new
technically the Manager of Publishing Operations.
He is the assistant to the manager of publishing operations. Big title change there.
Yep.
And then, of course, it's Friday. So joining us from across the country is our very own Cameron Arcan. Cameron, great having you here. So let's kick off today. We've got, as usual, we have 3 topics for you. We want to talk a little bit about a recent Trump quote that is interesting. We want to talk about what's going on in the pro-life movement. Fox also had a very interesting clip that they broadcast. It was actually a live piece they were doing that got interrupted because of a hunt. They were doing it at the border, and it got hunted. It got interrupted because of a hunt for illegals in the background. We've got that video for you.
Yikes.
Last. So good stuff today. Brian, you're going to kick us off.
Yeah.
Trump was speaking recently.
Yes.
He also started talking about 2012 a little bit and potential options there. Tell us about it.
2024.
2012.
2012 was
2024.
9
How about
years
that?
ago.
12 years off.
Cameron was all of 8, 9 in 2012.
Yeah, I was in the 4th grade.
Thanks, Josh.
Notice what? I told
just
him to
made
only
you
put
guys-
tea in the cup, but it apparently has something else. All right.
Former President Donald Trump, in an interview with Fox Business's Maria, I always butcher her last name, Bartiromo. I always butcher it. Was basically was broached about the subject of running again in 2024. No, Trump did not give a definitive answer. I imagine he will play coy for at least another couple of years. There's no point in announcing it now. But one name that was brought up that definitely caught my eye, just because he's kind of been growing in popularity recently, is Trump kind of mentioned by name Ron DeSantis as I think his exact quote was, he's a great guy.
Tremendous guy.
Yes.
One of the best guys you'll ever meet.
But yeah, Trump basically said, Ron would be considered. He's a great guy. So essentially talking about Ron DeSantis as a possible VP pick for him.
A running mate
in 2024. I guess, this we can go any number of directions with this because it's a pretty fruitful topic. But I guess my first question, and Cameron, I want to ask you first, is this a good thing? Would a Trump DeSantis ticket be a good thing in 2024? I know a lot of conservatives, at least younger conservatives, a lot of them have felt that DeSantis would be a good presidential candidate, not a vice presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your thoughts on that, Cameron?
Well, I forgot who posted, but I was reading a Twitter thread about this yesterday saying that calling someone a VP candidate is the most backhanded compliment that you can possibly give in politics. And I think one thing that's very difficult about this is I don't want to see Trump run again in 2024. I think we need someone younger and someone who could probably bring some more fresh ideas, unite the country. But I do like DeSantis a lot. So I think a Trump DeSantis ticket would appeal to a lot of the populist crowds, a lot of the people who were really big on Trump in 2016 and in 2020. I just don't think it will really pick up any new voters to actually get a Republican back in the White House.
I like Cameron's assessment that it's a fantastic backhanded compliment. I think Trump, and that might have been the way Trump meant it, I don't know. I do think there was a lot of strategery, as we say, in Trump's choice of words there. I think he was essentially trying to make sure that DeSantis stays second banana and doesn't dare think about becoming the star of the show.
At least not yet.
At least not yet. DeSantis polled fantastically well at CPAC. Trump did poll better, but I think even at CPAC there had been a shift. We saw polling higher for him than maybe some of us expected.
Yep.
He was the runaway favorite. I think Kristi Noem was next up, and she had just a fraction of the support that DeSantis had. DeSantis, you come out of a really difficult situation where you have led and succeeded, and people want to thrust more leadership on you. He has done unbelievably well in Florida with COVID. He kept the state open. When you graph deaths and deaths per capita, casualties from COVID, Florida looks as good as about anybody else does. And their economy didn't suffer nearly the blow that many other states did, California and Michigan, and many other, New York and many others. So the guy's got a great track record. I also like that he's plain talking. One of the biggest attractions with Trump was that he was a plain talker. He didn't talk down to people, and he didn't, what's the way to say this? He didn't get caught in the weeds in political minutia, policy minutia. And DeSantis doesn't either. I mean, he calls a spade a spade.
Yeah, Trump, one thing I think Trump never got enough credit for is just he avoided the pitfalls that a lot of politicians fall into when they feel like they're patronizing you. I never felt that way with Trump.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I think DeSantis has some of that in his lingo.
Yeah, and maybe that's related to being sort of an everyman. Trump is certainly an elitist. But he was ultimately an everyman. He'd grown up doing construction in Queens. His dad had built, I think he had actually built a lot of tenement houses. He was not the Trump organization wasn't the Trump organization then, and that's why he was always looked down on in Manhattan, because he was this son of a Queens builder, and he was kind of new money and stuff. But he ultimately kind of knew how to get on with people. It was the same thing with Bill Clinton. He was an Arkansan who I think it was very hard to ever look at Bill Clinton and think this guy thinks way too much of himself. This guy thinks he's that much better than I am. And man, that is just all we have seen in politics since George W. probably.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to see, conservative candidates who can at least play some of the populist game. Populism's super dangerous, super duper dangerous, but it is alive and well in the United States today. And I think most of the people who would consider themselves in the populist movement are essentially conservative, or at least have basically conservative values. And so being able to connect with those people is good. And I think DeSantis probably could connect with them.
Yeah. So given all that, Josh, I'd like you to put on your wizard hat? No
problem.
What's it called? The guys who have the little crystal balls. What kind of hat did they wear? It was what's his name's old bit? Something Johnny Carson. Yeah,
his Karnak hat.
Karnak.
I was
pronouncing the word Karnak. Yes. Anywho, so it is 2024.
We know our viewership skews a little bit older than the folks behind the table here, and I apologize for that sacrilege as it relates to Johnny Carson, the king of the night.
Apologies. So it's 2024.
Yeah.
The Republican ticket is officially Trump versus DeSantis, or Trump and DeSantis. How are you feeling about their chances, assuming Biden and Harris, opt for a second term? Assuming that's what we get in 2024, who do you see winning that?
Oh gosh, so much of it's going to depend on what happens in the next 3.5 years.
Yep.
I mean, look, if the chances of the economy really cranking back up once it hits pre-COVID levels, the chances of it continuing to go up with the amount of spending we're doing, I think is, I don't think that's especially likely. Inflation has to kick in at some point, folks. I mean, you just can't print money. And even I find myself sitting here thinking, when is this finally going to happen? We have printed so much money in the last 13 years. It is eventually going to catch up with us. But look, if the economy does absolutely take off, if we are able to avoid any serious terrorist attacks, if things on the military front stay fairly quiet, I don't know, Biden may have a decent shot at it. But good Lord, 3.5 more years of Biden trying to hold himself together mentally, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I don't mean it in an insulting way. I mean, he's an older man who clearly has difficulty recalling things from time to time, and for him to hold that together for another 3.5 years and deal with the rigors of the campaign trail, and the American people to look at him in the midst of that and say, "Hey, we're willing to give you 4 more." That's dicey. Whereas you've got Trump, who has always been kind of more vital than,
despite not being that much younger than
Biden.
Yeah,
but he looks like
younger.
he acts like he's half his age, and then you've got somebody significantly younger in the person of DeSantis, and surely DeSantis would appeal to a broader swath of Americans than Kamala and her truly unbelievable leftist background.
Oh, Kamala. Cameron, what do you think? How do you think, if you were to predict, how do you think a Trump DeSantis ticket would do against a Biden Harris ticket in 2024?
Well, I think the point was just made there where it's going to depend on the economy largely, where if we have some sort of economic boom and we're back to pre-COVID levels, that's probably going to bode well for Biden. If we have an economic crash, that's kind of where Trump and a hypothetical DeSantis ticket could kind of ride in and be like, hey, we're here to help. We're going to bring in our conservative leadership. And we could even say Biden's lockdowns did this. Like that would kind of be like the term that they could use, look back past few years, what led up to this moment. So I think that could be something that is a possibility. One thing I am a little bit confused about, though, is Trump would have to change his residency to the state of New York. So I don't really know if constitutionally, if it's possible for the president and the VP to be from the same state. But that's a totally other random side point on that. But I'm not feeling too great about a like Trump victory again in 2024.
Are you not feeling great about that because you don't see it in the cards, or because you think it would not be best?
I'm going to say both on that. And the reason why I say that is Trump already lost to Biden once. And I think a lot of Republicans at this point might be kind of in the rising generation of voters, might be a little bit tired of seeing people in their 70s constantly try and run for office. And I think at that point, people are going to want to ditch Trump at that point. We still have a few years left. People might want him back, but I just don't think it's possible.
That's interesting. Tell us about, you've been watching what's been going on in the pro-life movement, and we've really had some pretty decent victories recently. I know you've been tracking that. Tell us a little bit about that, Cameron.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff happening on the state level, particularly this week with the pro-life movement. We had 3 different states pass pro-life legislation. You had Doug Ducey sign a state bill which banned abortions on the basis of genetic abnormalities, which really covers things like Down syndrome. Then you had Montana sign 3 different pro-life bills into law, most notably banning abortion after 20 weeks when an unborn child can feel pain. And then both Oklahoma and Idaho, so that makes it 4, signed heartbeat bills, which basically bans abortion right at around 8 weeks. So one thing I kind of wanted to ask you guys is, these are usually very controversial when these heartbeat bills or any other abortion restriction kind of passes. And a lot of times Democrats will kind of run with something and be like, this is anti-woman, this is anti-family, when a lot of times these bills are oftentimes introduced by women in the state legislature. So what I kind of want to ask you guys is, how do you think we can expand the pro-life movement and maybe either change the messaging to get a larger group of people, or how do we at least kind of end some of the false narratives around it?
Ooh, good, very good question. First off, just to note, we're located here in Arizona. Doug Ducey did sign that legislation that stopped abortion based on genetic abnormalities. In other words, you can't abort your child because it's a Downs baby now. And I think my favorite response to that comes from a Democrat Arizona House rep who said it was just downright anti-family. It's just anti-family to not let people kill Downs babies. And I mean, good Lord, what else do you have to say there? So to answer your question, and I think it ties in a little bit with that comment from, I think it was Representative Espinoza. The wording is just so important. They have used the word fetus for a long time, trying to distance the act of abortion from the act of killing a baby. So it's a different thing if you dissect a fetus than it is when you kill a baby in utero. I love the idea of the term preborn children. Mm-hmm. I think that's super, super useful. Mm-hmm. The idea of aborting a preborn child is a little bit harder. Cameron, I think we have seen other victories on this spectrum. It's really interesting. We were talking about this last week when we were talking about Second Amendment stuff. There are places in the ideological war in the country where we're just deadlocked, and it is hard to make really any progress at all. But man, we have made unbelievable Second Amendment progress over the last over the last 20 years. And I think we're making significant progress on abortion right now. I mean, if you guys remember, before they were boycotting Georgia for the election law, they were talking about boycotting Georgia because of pro-life laws. Yeah.
The heartbeat bill.
Yeah. So I think we're seeing progress along those lines. Cameron, I think continuing, I think as the science gets better, the imaging gets better, it gets harder and harder to deny that is that's not just a blob of cells, that it's a child. I think the better the imaging gets, the better. I think, and we're moving in a direction where we are requiring, if I'm not mistaken, we are requiring more women to wait before they get the abortion and to get the sonogram, to get a look at what this new child is. And there are a lot of them who change their minds. Also, continuing to focus on the factually racial nature of abortion. Abortion is not a racist act, but it turns out that it way disproportionately affects African Americans. There is a genocide going on in America's inner cities, which is where Planned Parenthood clinics are. It's a really funny thing. Planned Parenthood says they're out there to help provide health care options for women, but they provide them in the cities where there are already lots of healthcare options. You don't see a lot of Planned Parenthood clinics out in the country. And when you look at, gosh, I don't remember the stats. I want to say 2/3 of abortions are African American, but don't quote me on that. But I think exposing that too and saying, look, I mean, imagine how many more Tim Scotts we'd have had. Had that Holocaust not happened. Imagine how many more Clarence Thomases we'd have had, how many more Ben Carsons, how many more Booker T. Washingtons, George Washington Carvers. I mean, these are brilliant, potentially brilliant people who are getting snuffed out. We might have had a cure to cancer by now, but we killed the guy. We killed the baby who was going to grow up to figure out how to cure it. So I think just continuing to get facts out, using language effectively, and I think highlighting the racial nature of it is helpful.
Yeah. So this is pretty much a microcosm of me and Josh, but notice Josh went for the facts and the logic when trying to win hearts and minds. I'm a much more emotional person. So honestly, I think for me it is sort of like a. Actually, I will get a little personal here. So I'm a new dad, greatest thing ever, and just part of that, like, I feel like there are a lot of people who pay lip service to being pro-life. Like, you say I'm pro-life, but man, it's not until you're holding your own kid until you become a parent where it's like the gravity of that belief kind of you feel it for the first time. And so I wish I had a better answer for you, Cameron, but I wish there was a way I could like harness that feeling, of being a new parent. And, if I could give people a taste of that, and, because I do feel like a lot of abortions come from a place of probably, fear of, man, can I do this? I can't do this. And man, I also had those concerns, but man, that first time you hold your kid, it's like, all right, it's not a matter of can I do this, it's how do I do it? Like that's all there is to it. And if there was a way to just kind of like harness that and share that with people, I think it could change a lot of hearts and minds. Because, I mean, Josh, you know me, I'm as big a schlub as you'll ever meet. If I can be a parent, literally anyone can. So,
an Asian schlub. All right. Now, so there's an interesting point there too. When you think about the drive, the parents have to provide for their children and to protect their children. You would do anything to protect your son. Your wife would do anything. You can look at that one of two ways. That either exists in parents because God put it in them, or if you take an evolutionary view of things, because evolution decided, hey, that's a really important thing. So one way or the other, the instinct, there's a very real reason the instinct to protect your offspring is there.
Yep.
And so we could then argue that anything that works counter to that would harm that offspring, is either probably runs against the plan God has for us, or it's anti-Darwinian. And so whether you're on the creationist Christian side of things or even an atheistic evolutionary side of things, you've still got to deal with this problem. It's like parents have this built into them from the system, whatever the system is, to protect their kids, and we're doing the exact opposite. And if you're talking to a Christian, he should tell you, well, to thumb your nose in the face of God is a bad idea. A secularist would say to thumb your nose in the face of evolution is a bad idea. We're doing a lot of thumbing, and that's a dangerous thing. That's good stuff, Cameron. Yeah, go ahead.
Something I just kind of want to add is I think there's a lot of misrepresentation of what the pro-life stance is. I think a lot of people might dismiss the pro-life stance as a bunch of religious nuts, and we'll see all of it as that, and they're like, oh, well, I don't want to associate with that. These people want to take women's rights away. They want to do all this. There's a lot of secular arguments for the pro-life movement. There's a lot of science backed for it. There's a lot of, and I would encourage Christians, I would encourage pro-lifers, whether they're religious or not, to learn both the religious arguments and the secular arguments for the pro-life movement, because that's how you're going to get a lot of pro-choicers or pro-abortion if I'm using the terminology to be consistent with it. But I think there is a lot of room there for where people need to meet someone in the middle for that and find where they can actually get someone to believe in the pro-life stance by using their own knowledge of the world.
Yeah, and the idea that these are religious nuts is when you run into somebody who argues that, I think they're probably demonstrating the limits of their experience or their own myopia. If you get out of a liberal bubble or a leftist bubble, and go looking around, I think you're going to find an unbelievable number of people who are not especially Christian, who are certainly not churched, who are fiercely pro-life. We live in the small town, a sort of a small suburb in Arizona that is not particularly churched, and I don't think it is particularly Christian. But it is unbelievably conservative in most ways. And if you watch an argument about life versus abortion play out there, it's not a bunch of religious nuts who are arguing the pro-life position. It's people who feel it deeply and instinctively and have very good reasons. So again, it's an interesting observation, Cameron, because it points back to this idea that if the chattering class, if the elites would leave the ivory towers or leave Midtown Manhattan and actually get out and meet other Americans, they would see that, oh, hey, it turns out the American countryside is actually super clean. It turns out we're not overpopulated. It turns out that there are a lot of people who believe things opposite of what the left believes, and they're not religious nuts. So again, when I hear that, I just think, good gosh, I lived with you people in Boston for a couple of years, and I'm just so glad I moved back to the South and then ended up coming to Arizona. Anything else on that topic, fellas? Last call. Hearing nothing. All right, let's wrap up. We promised you a video at the top of the show. Ooh. Fox had a really interesting thing happen. I believe this was yesterday. Dana Perino was set to interview a Texas rancher who's been dealing with illegals. He's a border rancher. He's been dealing with illegals trespassing on his property. They're in the middle of the interview. She asks him a question. If you listen very closely, you can hear a little something in the background. He gets distracted. He clearly can't hear her. We're going to play the clip, and we want you to listen to it more than watch it, because the audio, at least for the first about 30 seconds or so, the audio is the more interesting part. Let's go ahead and roll that. Dana Perino on Fox interviewing a Texas rancher.
So, it's very unfortunate that we don't have support from our local from our CBP.
Mark Kelly is the senator from Arizona. And he said about last night's speech, what I didn't hear tonight was a plan to address the immediate crisis at the border, and I will continue holding this administration accountable to deliver the resources and staffing necessary for a humane, orderly process as we work to improve border security, support local economies, and fix our immigration system. But I just feel that it seems to me, having been there, that there's a lack of urgency being expressed.
Dana, I'm sorry, I had a group of guys coming through looking for some immigrants. You're going to have to put it back at me again. I'm just going to tell you.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to tell you that we don't have, we're not getting the support as the U.S. This is not panning out good for us. We're under siege here. And when I say that, I've already caught 3 this morning before breakfast,
So 2 really interesting things there. If you could make it out, there were dogs barking in the background. The rancher actually couldn't understand Perino's question because there were presumably officials with dogs trying to track down illegals in the background. If they weren't officials, then I guess the border militia types are now using dogs to track down illegals. But that was going on right in the back of the shot, so close that you could actually hear it. And then afterwards, he says, look, we're under siege here. It's to the point, I actually caught 3 of these guys this morning before breakfast. Yeah, before breakfast. They say fact is stranger than fiction, or at least maybe more compelling. And that's some pretty compelling video. What do you guys just make of this? I mean, Cameron, you're sitting there watching this. This happens. Maybe you're watching live. This happens. What are you thinking?
I just saw the irony of the Mark Kelly quote being read as this whole thing is going on. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that. I'm like, this is the most passive political statement I've heard so far in the border crisis. And here this guy's over here actually having to deal with it firsthand. It's unbelievable. And it just kind of shows the lack of urgency from so many politicians on this. So hats off to that guy for being able to brave through this pretty much.
That's a great observation. Logan, can you cue that up again? I want to run that again, and this time let's actually pay attention to the Kelly quote contrasted against the dogs yapping in the background. Run it again, Logan.
So, it's very unfortunate that we don't have support from our local from our CBP.
Mark Kelly is the senator from Arizona. And he said about last night's speech, what I didn't hear tonight was a plan to address the immediate crisis at the border, and I will continue holding this administration accountable to deliver the resources and staffing necessary for a humane, orderly process as we work to improve border security, support local economies, and fix our immigration system. But I just feel that it seems to me, having been there, that there's a lack of urgency being expressed.
That's good, Logan.
Dana,
so that's I want to support the staff. Woof 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 for a humane and orderly process. Woof woof woof. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, Watching that, it really kind of struck home the idea that it feels like the left kind of, we use coastal elites as this like pejorative term, but you think about how they're all, we're pro open and free borders. Their lives aren't really the one, like, you see this guy, the guy who's interviewed, like, it's his everyday life. This is this is the same as, a fancy coastal elite going to a Starbucks and using their Wi-Fi to write his new novel. Like, it's
imagine raising
life.
your son down there and that. Would you let him out in the yard?
No, and it's just terrifying that, like, I've long argued, like, when it comes to borders, like, look, when you open up or if you have a globe, there's lines on a globe for a reason. You can't have a sovereign nation without established borders. In the most literal of senses, you can't do that. And the flippant attitude about immigration from the left and just their lack of understanding how this impacts everyday Americans, and their lack of caring about not caring. They're not making the effort to better understand this situation.
At the end of the interview, we cut the clip before the end of the interview, but at the end of the interview, he says to Dana, he says, "Look, I'm telling you, they're not stopping here. They're coming to you guys. It is going to impact you ultimately. They are ultimately coming to you guys." And I think that's probably true. We've been unbelievably lucky so far that we haven't had a terrorist attack that
from the south,
came in from
border.
down there. Yeah, it's also remarkable to me that we don't see narco terrorism going on down there but the cartels are busy enough, I guess, killing each other. But it is just unbelievable, and I applaud part of the Biden administration for actually saying, "Hey, look, those walls that we were saying we were going to stop building.
Yeah, maybe we should build them.
Maybe we need to get back into the wall business." Now, whether or not that happens is one thing. It takes some guts politically to say that, but if somebody's willing to lay it on the line like that, when we're in the kind of danger we're in from the South, that is a worthwhile thing. It's something that is commendable. Cameron, any other thoughts on any of this?
Other than Mark Kelly being an astronaut, I feel like the joke writes itself with all of that. But honestly, the whole thing at the border, I feel bad for a lot of the people that really have to deal with this whole process, and I mean everyone involved with this. And it's there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of good people who want to come to this country, and there's also a lot of crime that happens too. So it takes a lot of there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to secure the border, and Biden just kind of undid all of it.
Yeah, needlessly. And I really don't think he believes the rhetoric he's spewing very much more than we do. He has not been traditionally so soft on border security, but man, the radical left, they have got their tentacles around that guy, and he is just a mouthpiece for them right now.
It's kind of sad, almost.
It's
like
sad.
It's like propping up a Weekend at Bernie's, just propping up.
It's sad, and I've said it before. Like, I don't think Biden ultimately is a true believer in this stuff. I think he's being used by true believers. I think Kamala is a true believer, and so the scariest position in the world is that Joe Biden, Joseph Robinette Biden, is standing between us and the ultra libs. That is a terrifying thought, especially since he appears to be going
He's the
nuts.
last line of defense.
He is the last line of defense. He wasn't much of a defense to start with, and now he appears to be losing his mind. So, as they say, God help us. We do need God's help. He's the only one who can get us through this. That's a little bit of a downer note to end the week on, but we got a couple laughs. Oh, you got something.
I have a high note to end.
Brian has a high note to end the week on, folks.
Just speaking from seeing my personal family go through it, there is a right and a wrong way to immigrate to this country. The right way is pretty awesome. Like, just the whole thing of becoming a citizen. Like, seeing that from my family when they went through it the right way, went through the process like that, amazing feeling. I felt so happy for them seeing that.
And there is we are 99% certain Brian is not a Chinese spy. mostly because he is Korean and not actually Chinese. All right. Anyway.
On that note,
That's our Friday afternoon, folks. Is it Friday? I hope it's Friday. That's our Friday afternoon, folks. Thanks for spending the time with us. We appreciate it. We are here 3 times a week on WJ Live. We are here Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. When you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button. After that, you can hit the little bell. Click that. That'll make sure you get notified when we go live. We appreciate your support through watching this show and also through reading articles at the Western Journal at westernjournal.com. If you'd like to support us in a more overt way, we would welcome it. If you feel led to do that, you can go to westernjournal.com/join. That's westernjournal.com/join. We've got a couple of great options for you to sign up there and really some cool benefits and perks that go with membership over at the Western Journal. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to see you next Monday. Until then, be safe, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hey, guys. Huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Sam, we're going to need a slot for that story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.